Hi everyone, and welcome to Series 2 of the Confidence Conversations podcast. I'm Gail from Enrichment Coaching, and I'm a personal development and confidence coach. My vision is to live in a world where people feel confident to be their best authentic version of themselves every day. I really want to empower people to take action through exploring what I like to call their confidence DNA and how they can enrich it. So my style of coaching is really informal, it's conversational, and it will always be all about you. I'm not all about models and theory, although I do believe they have their time and place. I'm really actions focused, I'm direct, and there's no fluffy stuff involved. And I'm a big believer in pulling up your big pants and going and getting stuff done. Now, I love to make a difference to those beliefs that you have about what you think you can and cannot do. So if you've been thinking about how one-to-one coaching might work for you and you want to find out more, then get in touch through my website, which is enrichmentcoaching.co.uk, and you can find my links at the bottom of each show notes. So enough about me. I'm really excited to be back with Series 2 of the Confidence Conversations podcast with some incredible guests who are ready to talk honestly about them and their confidence. Now, for this series, rather than kind of general confidence conversations, we're going to be digging a bit deeper to understand more about the things that have an impact and the things that enrich your confidence. And remember, there's little to no editing, meaning the conversation you hear is really authentically confident. If you listen regularly, I'd love you to subscribe, and more than that, I'd love to hear what you think. So feel free to get in touch. So go on and listen to the latest episode. Hi everyone, it's Gail from Enrichment Coaching here, and in this bite-sized episode of the Confidence Conversations podcast, I just want to spend a few moments before we get into Series 2 talking about the origins of confidence and also referring to the iceberg analogy. So I'll be asking you shortly to visualise an iceberg as I talk you through what I'm banging on about. So it turns out then that confidence can actually be genetic and in our DNA. And for some of us, it's thought to be anywhere between 25 to 50% if we have this gene. Now, research has also shown over the years that confidence genes can be manipulated, unlike some others, and it can be influenced over time as well, which is absolutely amazing news for those of us who often feel like we don't have much confidence. Now, we know that confidence means different things to different people, and that confident feeling can sometimes feel a little bit like we're on a roller coaster. 1 minute you're right up high, and then the next it takes a massive dip and you're down at the bottom. And that's often very situational, depending on what's going on for us right now. Now, like our DNA, confidence has many different strands, but it's deeply underpinned by three things. And here's the moment where I want you to picture an iceberg. So right at the very top of the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, the bit that sticks out of the water, we've got our confidence. And this is our outward display. This is what people see. And then underneath the surface, our iceberg is underpinned by our upbringing, right at the very bottom, really, really deep, where our beliefs and our values are created, and we hold these close to us. A little bit further up towards the surface are our experiences. And these are where we learn, where we create our memories and we build our resilience. Finally, just sort of teetering below the surface is our environment. So who we surround ourselves with, where we are, what we're doing. And whilst we can't change our upbringing, we can alter our experiences and our environment to impact our confidence levels in a positive way. So if we just go back a little bit, it's important to say that confidence is something we outwardly display and inwardly feel. And it's mostly driven by our thoughts, which will turn into actions. Now, for that confident display to take place, there are three more strands that can build a stronger, more confident you. And the first one is courage. You'll need this piece of courage to give things a go, to take action, to act as if you were confident, and yes, to pull up your big pants and go and do it. You'll then need to practice this new thing that you've learned, or this thing that you've been doing, because if we want to be good at anything, we practice. Again, we pull up our big pants, we go off and do it, we practice until we're good at it. And then the final thing, consistency. being consistent is what makes a lasting change. So the good news is you can change your levels of confidence. Now, for me, enriching confidence is about those three things. It's about courage, practice, and consistency, possibly in any order, but used together, they become really powerful. So if you want to know more and you want to see a video, a visual of this, you can head to my social media, and I've got a YouTube channel and you can find the video on there, and I'll pop the link in the show notes. Same content, same verbal interaction if you like, but you'll be able to see the visual of the iceberg. And of course, if you're interested to understand how one-to-one coaching might work for you to build your confidence, then please do get in touch with me through my website, enrichmentcoaching.co.uk. Hi everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Confidence Conversations podcast. And I'm really excited today to have a chat about confidence and resilience with Julian Roberts. So hi Julian, welcome.
Good to see you, Gail.
It's silly really, because we live down the road from each other, yet we could have got together to do this, and we're not. We're sat probably.
It's probably easier on Zoom, isn't it?
It probably is, to be fair.
Working everything. I agree. I probably drove past your house or something this afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us, for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about you and what you do. It sounds like blind date, doesn't it? And tell us about you and where you come from.
I'm an executive leadership coach or life coach, whatever. A coach of all many forms, help SMEs and use individuals and teams. And my purpose is to unlock human potential, create and build strategies for people, and to help people create and cultivate a really resilient mindset. And I do that on an individual basis, and I do that in the context of teams. So that's my purpose. That's what drives me. That's what makes me get excited about engaging with my clients.
And I love this whole idea, because we just said before, we should have pressed record earlier, but we just said, I'm really interested in this idea of how resilience links to confidence, and just to explore that a little bit, because I think for me, I call some of these things that support confidence like confidence cousins, and I think like resilience is one of those. But I guess in some ways you've almost got to have a bit of courage, maybe fail a little bit for you then to work out what your resilience is. But before we go into that, tell me first of all, what confidence means to you.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I've been wrestling with this for many years, because I find sometimes you get caught up with the thing about confidence, and sometimes it feels like it comes and goes, and it feels very sort of fluid. And is it based on my experience? Is it based on my skills? Is it based on the situation? And I've sort of wrestled with it, and I suppose I tend to flip it more to the word courage. You mentioned the word courage, because I was thinking about it, and I did this with a client once who was getting caught up with confidence, and it was wasn't a helpful word for them. And if you're going to abseil off a mountain, you might have the confidence in the rope that's going to hold you. Yeah. You might have the confidence that it's pegged in properly by an instructor. You might have the confidence in the instructor telling you what to do properly, and you might have the harness on and everything. But confidence is not going to get you over the edge, I don't think. For me, it's courage that gets you over the edge, and I think that's where I come into situations where I suppose this sounds really counterintuitive. I don't want to be confident in a situation, because that feels I know everything. And I'm in a place of comfort, and I've attained everything, and therefore potentially I can miss out on opportunities. And that's why I use courage. And I like to go into a situation where I feel slightly not entirely sure the outcome of this scenario right now, whether that's coaching a client, whether that's going to a networking event, whatever it may be. And courage for me is that ability to step into a situation and you don't know whether you're going to fail or be successful. And frankly, it doesn't really matter. And I think it all stems back to me also. I used to get caught up on outcomes and objectives, and they're helpful sometimes, but we can't control those. And all we can control is the process. And for me, courage helps that process of stepping over the edge or stepping into a situation that's slightly unknown. I don't know if I answered that at all, because I feel I've rambled around something there, but that's my thinking on it.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I think you're right when you say, we get caught up in this word confidence, and probably similar for resilience as well, which we'll come on to. But I think you're right, because for those that listen and have seen, I've done a video as well about what I call the confidence iceberg. So it's the iceberg model, and the very tip of the iceberg is confidence, sorry. And that is what you see, right? That's the outward display. So you might look at somebody doing the abseil and going, oh wow, they look really confident. Yeah. But actually you're right, what they've got is the courage to take that step off the edge. And I think teetering just underneath the surface of the sea where the iceberg comes out is this piece around courage. You almost need this piece around courage, maybe a bit of practice, consistency. And you're right, you will take confidence from the people that surround you in your abseiling scenario, which I love that. But actually you've got to have the courage to do it. Maybe if it's the second or third time you've done it, you might have a little bit more confidence that kind of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you're still going to need the courage to step off the edge.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think you definitely answered that. And I think this thing about confidence feeling really fluid as well is, sometimes people describe it as a bit of a roller coaster. 1 minute you're up high and your hands are in the air and you're loving life as you're going down, and then the next minute you hit the bottom and you're like, God, what is going on now? It's definitely I don't want to use the word journey, but it's a practice. It's something that we need to keep practicing and keep going with. Definitely interesting. So
it is, and it's. I suppose that's why I love to focus on the courage piece, because it's a little bit edgy to it as well. Because I know the feeling of that courageous step is slightly uncomfortable, and so in a weird way, that's more consistent than my confidence on something. And I appreciate the more we do something, we get more confident and skilled, experience. I know there's elements of that, but I think still situations can rock you, or you could be very good at speaking to people, and suddenly an environment changes or people change, and suddenly you weren't expecting it, and suddenly your confidence is knocked, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're expecting to have, I don't know, 30 people turn up and 50 turned up, and suddenly like, I wasn't expecting that, because you're not in control of that. And that's where I think courage for me feels a better reframe for me on it, because then I go, okay, that's exciting. That's a little bit different. I didn't realise that, but that's okay. So I was expecting slightly unnerviness anyway.
And that's interesting as well, because then I think you're starting to feel really curious about why you're needing courage, or why you're feeling a little bit like that, rather than going, oh my God, this is really not my confidence. You're almost being a bit curious about those feelings that you're experiencing in that moment.
Yeah, no, I think, because I always ask for the wisdom in those situations, which is that curiosity of, why do I feel like this? Why is this going on? And actually, that can be really helpful. And I think another analogy: if you were jumping off a cliff into water, you're going to get, well, I would. Perhaps you do all the time. I don't know, but the sense of fear will stop you initially, doesn't it? You think, oh my goodness. But actually, if you look for the wisdom in that fear, that actually there's some wisdom. Actually, why is okay? Well, make sure I go a bit further beyond the actual cliff and don't clip. Make sure I run properly. Make sure I look at the ground. Actually, look for the wisdom that could be helping you navigate to jump off. So almost use the fear and turn it into some helpful signposting, revelation. And then it starts to take away the fear a little bit. That still might be still feeling a little bit scared, but actually you rationalize it a little bit more. You engage your logic brain, your prefrontal cortex, and so therefore you get less, fight or flight. I think that, to me, just weirdly rationalizing things, those situations, then you think, oh, okay, I'll go for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, and I don't think that you said weirdly. I completely resonate with that, because when again we both do coaching, when we're talking to clients, quite often I'll say, what are the facts about this? What do we know about? And it just removes that emotion, doesn't it, from the kind of the logic, and you're able to see things a bit differently, definitely. So on the same kind of vein then, how do you describe resilience?
I describe it, it's not just about grit and determination, which I think is a really slightly toxic way of just plowing on in life. I think that's where people say, I'm a resilient, I just keep going. For me, resilience, the key thing to resilience is the learning loop, being able to learn. You got knocked down, you got stopped in your way, you got challenged, things didn't go quite as expected. What did you learn in that scenario? What was the learning of that failed business? What was the learning of that? The presentation didn't quite go as well as you expected, and you've got to get yourself back up. But before you get yourself back up, what did you learn? What was the understanding? What can you reflect on? What can you do things differently next time? To me, that's resilience, and I think that whole learning loop is vital for resilience, whether it's an individual or a team. And I often do this, if I've done things or launched things or even with clients and I've realized it didn't quite work, rather than thinking, oh no, I'm rubbish and sort of plowing into a world of despair, actually, what can I learn from that? And seeing failure, things going wrong, sounds very cliche, as feedback. And again, the reframe of that makes it helpful, because then, okay, I got more feedback for next time, therefore I want to learn more and keep moving on. And I think that's what resilience is for me, and that's how you become a resilient individual. Whether you're managing a business or within an organization, things won't go according to plan. Fact of life is things will go wrong, things will go astray in terms of what you expect, and you can't control that. What you can control is how you respond and how you act and how you learn from that and how you move on from that.
Yeah, and I love this idea of this learning loop. And I think I've said to quite a few people before, when I started my business, I think I had to reframe good and bad decisions, because I kind of felt that there was no such thing as a bad decision, because whatever happened, I would learn something. Because it's easy to, tell yourself off, isn't it, for, oh, I've made a really bad, that was a really bad decision, Gail, when actually, no, I learned something from that. So,
Yeah.
and also your point about, grit and determination, kind of this just ploughing on, but then what do you learn from that? If you just keep ploughing, it's like the try and try again. It's only worth trying and trying again if you're going to make some changes and learn from what you didn't go quite so well the first time you tried it.
Well, is it that my brain's gone. Einstein said that, insanity is, trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And it's a similar vein as that, keep banging yourself head against a brick wall. Well, step back a little bit and think, is there another way of doing this? And what can I learn from that blockage? And I think it's not just about ploughing on. There's an element of, keeping going sometimes and, trying to go towards, but that then links to which for me is really important, is linking to purpose. That's the motivational piece here, and that's the bigger thing. Purpose is bigger than you. Purpose is bigger than the scenario. I remember I had a client during COVID, and CEOs in a state of shock, as we all were 3 years ago. And I said, I knew they were a purpose-driven organization. And I said, well, you got your purpose of your organization. I said, go back to your team and remind them of that purpose, because they were all in a bit of a state of shock. And I said, has your purpose changed in the context of COVID? And he said, well, not really, because it's so much bigger than the scenario. Remind yourself of the purpose, why you come up with it, what does it mean to you, and use it as a source of inspiration and energize. He went back to his team, came back to me a few weeks later, and he said it's so powerful. They all sort of almost lifted their gaze from what was going on in COVID and all the restrictions. They lifted the gaze towards something bigger, not in a world of losing sense of reality, but okay, that's what we're still heading for. How do we change our way of working? How do we do things differently to still maintain our purpose or walking towards our purpose in the context of this new reality? And it really helped them come up with new ideas, new solutions, new ways of working. And I think that's, for me, where purpose comes in, because things will go wrong and things won't happen as you expect. But if you've got whatever your purpose is, get back to that, because that's your source of energy individually or as a team or an organization, and use that as a way of, I suppose, navigating and almost standing back and look at the bigger picture. How to overcome this big boulder in the way and get back to your North Star. And I think that, to me, is linking to that learning piece as well, because you got to still have the motivation to keep going, still have that the energy just to keep sort of plowing on and to try new things.
I wonder as well how if somebody, and I guess I'm thinking about the listeners here and thinking about the individual, because I guess you'd expect a company, right, or a business to have a purpose. You kind of would, and then their vision and their values and all of that kind of thing. I'm wondering how this purpose applies to individuals, either in their business or in their career, and how you might work with somebody to link kind of the purpose with their, I suppose, resilience and maybe their courage as well.
Yeah, well, I had a client who was a mental health advocate, and she came to me because she was going to run 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents.
Wow.
And so she needed, well, apart from probably needed help in other ways, but me to help her from a mental resilient perspective and give her some mental hacks, resilient hacks. And so I worked with her. She completed it this year, amazing lady. Nice. But there was points along the way, as you can imagine, from the extreme of temperature in Antarctica to Perth in Australia, of like minus 35 to plus 35. Wow. Sleep deprivation, stomach problems, all sorts of things that were going wrong, as we all sort of expected. But there was one point when she was really struggling, and she just sort of broke down and started to cry, and she was having problems with her stomach, a problem with her ankle, and I think it was on the 4th marathon. I think that was in Spain, I think, I'm not sure. And it was, and they changed the route as well. It was meant to be a bit more of a scenic, and it ended up almost running through a housing estate, which wasn't the most inspiring anyway. But she used purpose to help her keep going, because then she goes, because rather than just saying the end point, visualizing the end point, that doesn't help you in the moment. It doesn't help you. And so she started to go back, well, why am I doing this? I'm a mental health advocate. I'm doing this for these charities. I'm doing this to talk about the whole piece about mental health and create an awareness. That's what she does. She's a lady who tried to commit suicide many years ago and now does this to try and sort of flip it for her and almost gives her a sense of purpose. And she used her purpose to overcome those scenarios and become bigger than that. And I think that's where, from a personal point of view, is how you can use it. And you obviously got to get clarity on that purpose to a certain extent. It doesn't have to be 100% clear, but it's got to be something that's meaningful, and it's usually bigger than you. It's usually nothing to do with you. It's usually about you impacting other individuals, whatever it may be in the context of what you do and how you do it. And it's just good to get that, but then reflect on it when you are having tough times, and think about, how can I continue to do this? That's my source of inspiration. This is why I do this. That'll keep me going. And it's far bigger than the 7 marathons. It's far bigger than that. And it goes back to also, I think the Marines or the Special Forces don't almost look about end points on scenarios. They always look at your 1 meter square. That's all you can control at any one point in time in life is your 1 meter square. And just think about how you can do your best in that 1 meter square to keep going to your destination of what you're trying to do.
And that's really important, I think, as kind of this control the controllables. What's in your control right here, right now. Because there's usually something, isn't there? Although it's not always obvious, but there is usually something that you can control right here in this moment, right now. Do you think that people are born with resilience, or do you think it can be built? Or do you think it's a combination?
I'm a believer of it. You can develop it. You can grow it. I believe it's like a muscle, and the more you do resilient techniques, habits, get more awareness of it, you can grow and develop it and make it stronger. I don't believe it's just some people more resilient than others. Perhaps some people have been exposed to scenarios that have pushed them, that have been tested more than you have, that has now helped them to develop it. Whether that's, I had a guy on my podcast who, a double amputee, Nepalese guy who had blown his legs off in Afghanistan, climbed Everest, overcome. I mean, it's just amazing. Everest in itself is amazing, but to do it without your legs above your knee is incredible. And that takes a lot of resilience. But I think it's something you can really develop and grow and become from wherever you are today, you can develop it and make it even stronger for the future. And I think we need to, I've got a real thing about, and I don't do stuff as yet, but young people, I think they've not had I suppose the resilience they need in this context. Because I think we live in a world of comfort, far too much comfort, and also scenarios of, Instagram where people, I did this and I make £100,000 a month scenario. And we know that there's an element of, but when it's just percolates through society and culture, that becomes an expectation. So when you set out your own business and you don't get that, you just give up and think, oh, this is terrible. I'm rubbish. I'm not very good at this. And you don't move forward. And I think, there's a sense of that sort of comfort as well as expectation by seeing what other people are doing. But no, definitely you can develop it and grow it.
And there's so many links there with confidence for me around it being like a muscle, kind of the more you use it. And there's definitely this piece around comfort and the comfort zone and what that looks like and feels like. And also the piece that you were saying, about how easy things appear. Remember, social media is often the show reel of life, isn't it? But, in some cases, things feel and appear to be much more easily available than they were a few years ago, probably when we were a bit younger, Julian, when we were like, spring chickens. Things seem to come much easier. And there was somebody that I was talking to a while ago who, because you just said there, actually, some people might have been exposed to more things that have maybe tested them more. And this lady was saying, that she'd been exposed to quite a lot of things and she felt that it was that had made her resilient. Therefore, she wanted her children to be exposed to things that were a little bit maybe out of the ordinary, out of the norm, that would have been the norm for her. But actually, she wanted her kids to experience them so they would build a bit more resilience in that sense. And I guess with that probably comes maybe a bit more confidence, courage, confidence, however we're referring to that, in that actually I've been here before. It feels a bit less awkward. I feel a bit less vulnerable because I kind of know and I've learned from that and I'm going to move on.
Yeah, and if you are trying to grow and you are pushing the boundaries and getting outside your comfort zone, everything else, you're in a place where you've never been there before. And in some ways, I want to be. I don't always do this. I want to be in a place I've never been before quite often, and because it's more exciting, and it stimulates growth, makes you more resourceful, but it is uncomfortable. Of course, it is. It really is. I mean, I do cold water swimming and stuff like that, and that's pretty uncomfortable. But by doing that as a physical thing, it makes me more wanting to do things emotionally or psychologically uncomfortable as well, because I'm used to it. My body's got this, I suppose, almost increasing the threshold of being uncomfortable. And I think that's where I think, I try and instill it in my kids as well, to try and create that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay, things that work out, what did you learn? How did you learn? And not to be the helicopter sort of parent coming in and sorting everything out, which that's what happens a lot of now. And so I think, creating discomfort, which sounds very stoic and everything else, I think is really healthy. And, I remember presenting at a sort of sales conference once, and I felt just nervous, but I wasn't a coach then, but I reframed it at the time to excitement. So I just reframed the emotion. It's the same emotion. But I felt uncomfortable because I was pushing the boundaries on the edge of what I've normally done before, going from 10, 20 people to a few hundred people. And so I think it's far more exhilarating, but failure will come with that. Things will go wrong. Things will happen. And I think that's the thing to marry that. And that's where the courage is. You don't know what's going to happen, do you? You don't know if it's going to be, go to plan or not to plan, because frankly, you're not in control of the outcome. Nobody is.
I think as well, you sparked so many different thoughts in me about possibly where I've built my resilience, even in the last sort of year, maybe. And there was an incident a couple of weeks ago, I talked about it on LinkedIn actually, where I did a team away day, and I'd done an activity. Bearing in mind, I've done this for like, the last God knows how many years, done this activity, and on the answer sheet, I'd got something transposed. So it caused mass confusion in the room. And I was like, there's no way I can style this out. So of course I just had to go, and I had no idea what was going to happen at this moment, but I had to stand in the middle of the room with 40 people and go, stop everybody, I've made a big mistake. And clearly I was quite vulnerable, quite sweaty, and all of that. But actually, I think that for me, that was building resilience to go, do you know, it's okay to make mistakes. We're all human, have a bit of self-compassion. No need to cry on the train on the way home, Gail, like you might have done. It was okay. And somebody replied on LinkedIn, someone that was in the room, and said, you made us realize it was okay to make mistakes. Yes. So, by having the courage myself to go, and I don't know that I would have done that a few years ago. I think I would have tried to have maybe blagged my way out of it. But now I was like, no, everybody stop, made a mistake. And I also feel like I've processed that much quicker than I would have done before.
That's interesting, isn't it? That actually became probably a powerful learning opportunity for somebody, not for you as well, but for somebody else.
Yeah.
Because role modeling is the most powerful way to influence and have impact on people. And, a leader or trainer, whatever, it doesn't matter, says, oh, I made a mess here, or it's not quite as expected. Actually, it's quite powerful and have that sort of vulnerability, then breeds vulnerability, and then other people, and that creates the whole psychological safety. People start taking more risks because it's okay to fail, because my boss said he failed and didn't get quite there. And I think that, to me, is the most powerful way is to impact people, is to role model, whether it's through your kids or people at work. Anyway, we're role modeling the moments we are in front of other people, Definitely. Good or bad. Even now we are role modeling, context of this. It doesn't matter what the scenario is. Wherever there's another person, you're on show in a sense.
Yeah.
And people are observing and picking up things, some subconscious, some the nuances, some so obvious. And I think that's powerful that you probably impacted other people more than you realize.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And I was also reading something this morning. I'm reading at the moment Emotional Agility by Susan David, and there is actually something in the chapter that I read this morning it was about walking your values, but it was talking about how your behavior is impacted by others, whether you realize that or not. It might not be directly the person you're talking to, but somebody else, your friends of friends, might impact your behavior because of what you take on. It's really interesting, isn't it? Really interesting. What do you think stops people from being resilient?
Interesting question. Stop. I think it goes back to this. If they've made a mistake or failed, they think that's it, and they've not learnt or been shown that actually that's just an opportunity to learn. I think that's what it is. It's that, and it's a little bit of the, so and so did this and they got 10 times their business, and I've only got 1 times my business. And I think it's that element of just needing people around them to say that's okay to have done that, and look at what I've done, I did this, and people sharing more their stories. I think that's what makes people not get into the resilience or build resilience, by creating times to learn, to reflect, because you have to process things. And whether it's an individual or a team, when things have gone wrong, and you made a mistake in a session, and I'm sure after or during email on it, you would have processed that. We don't spend enough time processing our lives and reflecting on what went. I'm not talking over analyzing, being critique on ourselves, but just processing the day, processing the week, processing the moments where something didn't quite go, or you just felt slightly uncomfortable in that conversation or whatever. I think we just need to process more, and that's where you get the learning opportunity, I think.
I think that's true as well, because I remember when I was doing my coach training, we talked about reflection, as you do quite a lot. And one of the things for me was that my coach supervisor at the time said, think about what was significant, because it's so easy, isn't it, when something goes wrong, to go over the absolute minutiae of everything in that scenario and what happened. And this whole what was significant, and that over the years has just, that one question has really helped me to focus in on, right, what was significant in that, then what was my behavior, and then what did I learn on the back of that, and what will I do differently next time. Just helped me to kind of bring it right back to actually what was most important here in that sense. So I guess my final question then final thing for you is, what would be your top 3 tips to somebody who is trying to build their resilience and maybe they need a little bit of help? What would you advise them to
do? I talk a lot about purpose. I think getting clarity in your purpose, and it sounds like a big thing, but it can be done quite easily. It doesn't have to be sort of going through a whole process, and you probably have some resonance of what that might be, because that really helps you navigate those difficulties of standing back and seeing the bigger picture. It's almost that, that graph, isn't it, of we had a bad day, but on the context of the overall picture, it made no real difference at all. You still made some progress. You just didn't make it in quite the direction you should have gone to, because something got in its way. But if we don't know our purpose, then we feel we're just in this world, small world, and it becomes very consumed by the problem. Having a sense of what your purpose is makes that problem smaller, because you stand back and and your purpose is beyond it. It's like a North Star. And I think, to me, that's one of the vital things I talk a lot with my clients, is get clarity on that purpose. It'll be the best thing, in terms of navigating difficulties and challenges. And then I think it's putting in some personal habits. I talk a lot about, making sure you do sort of gratitude, things like that. It's not about just positive thinking, but we know with gratitude, increases dopamine, serotonin. These are all good feel emotions. And there's a reality to that. There's a physiological thing that happens. And by doing that, you then start to see silver linings in scenarios. You start to see the opportunities, I suppose, the problems. You start creating narratives that are more positive. And I think that's where it's really helpful, because resilience, you need to see opportunities. You've got to see ideas, new ideas, innovation, be creative. And I think the gratitude piece does that as well. And then the 2 things here, I'm giving you 4, but reflection, reflection is, to create that learning loop, reflect, spend time wherever you find that might be, outside, in your armchair, take a time to reflect, journal it. Journaling is really powerful, especially when you look back. I don't journal myself, but a lot of people do look back on their journaling and they see how well they've come, and, oh yeah, last time I reacted like this, and now I'm not, and I'm changing, and that really helps see that you're becoming a better version of yourself, which is the only comparison you can do. And then the other one is mindfulness, and that to me is the reason for that, is that often when people get into a situation where it's really difficult, we just go fight or flights, and then we just lose all sense of logic. It's all very emotionally driven. We tend to make the worst decisions at that moment. But if you're more mindful, more in the moment, more in the presence, then you're connected more your prefrontal cortex, which is more logic, more clarity of thinking. Then you start to see the solution. You see the way through a scenario. And I guess by being more mindful as a practice, then you will be more likely to have sort of more clarity of thinking as well.
Great. Well, they're great ones. The whole, and the journaling one's really interesting as well, because I say I don't journal. I do have a journal, but it's just 3 things that I'm grateful for, or 3 things that have happened, and then there's a summary of kind of overall my day was. And I really like that. And I don't know that I look back, but the process of writing it down makes me reflect on the day before and go, what happened? How did I feel yesterday? Again, what was significant, I suppose. And definitely this piece about, how in my scenario, I had a piece of feedback last year, and I've reacted very differently to how I've reacted to the situation that I described earlier as well in the room. But I describe it as kind of the weight of those 2 felt the same, but the reaction feels very, very different in terms of how far you can come in that sense. Brilliant. So, Julian, if people want to know more about you and about resilience, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I tend to be on there quite a lot. Just obviously type in my name, or you can go to my website, which is julianrobertsconsulting.com.
And I'll pop those in the show notes. But also, I know that Julian also has a podcast, so which is you can get that on your website, can't you?
Yeah, and it's just called Helping Organizations Thrive. If you type that into Google, it'll come up.
Perfect. Julian, thank you for your time. It's been great talking to you. I think we could, like all of my guests, I think I could like literally talk all day, but we have to draw a line somewhere. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me, Gail. It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. And join us next time on the Confidence Conversations podcast.